our latest interview, we speak to Brett Beach, the co-founder of Made in Africa confectionery business, talking about its principles in setting up as an ethical business supporting confectionery production in Madagascar, also discussing how the business has handled the pandemic and looking ahead to 2021 in how the company is launching a new range of products.
Go into the whole business, but personally, I'm born in the UK, but grew up in the States and discovered Peace Corps shortly after university, which is
Wow.
2 years abroad volunteering, and I applied immediately and I got into Madagascar, and it was amazing. So you got to experience the country in the village with the people, nobody speaking English, so you had to learn language. And I just fell in love with the country. So after Peace Corps, I stayed. I worked the U.S. Embassy. I worked in the development agency, kind of like DFID for the U.S., USAID. Then I worked again in another job in Madagascar. So by the end of that, was 6 years later, and I loved the country, but I was also ready to go back to the U.S. And so that's how I got involved in my first company, and did that for about 10 years in chocolate and worked with vanilla. And then decided, it was time to set that aside and leave that business. And my wife had also had experience in Africa and in the US. She's Belgian, but she lived in the US for 7 years. What we really were most committed to is the idea of Made in Africa. And that's where we feel like we can make the biggest difference because of our experiences, but also because it's so underrepresented in the market. Fair trade is quite widespread. It's a good thing, but it ends at farm gate for the most part. But what we're talking about is completely different. And it's actually, interestingly, as I read through economics books, this is the reason countries have even gone to war with each other. This is, a source of conflict, the idea of making products like America and England. This is one of the major reasons for the revolution. England and Ireland around wool and cloth. European nations and their colonies around making things that wasn't allowed. So it's not that way anymore. Everybody's free to make things, but there's a really uneven playing field because of such a head start for the northern countries for the most part. And so that's our big push, and chocolate's the way to do that. And we want to go beyond chocolate, beyond Madagascar, to other categories in food and other countries in Africa. So it's a statement to the world, but it's also to offer up a great product that has a lot of authenticity, that's made at origin and adds a lot more value, basically, in Africa.
How challenging was it to move it forward to the point it is at today?
Yeah, I think every business has its aspirations. For us, the main thing is that the business can be at a sustainable level and keep growing organically through the consumer excitement for what we do. So getting off the ground, I'd say we're still sort of in that phase, in many ways, but it's the third year of trading. We had 10 years in the industry previously, and we work with a lot of people who also joined with us who have been directors in their own areas, whether it be design or development work. So we had that experience, but I think now, as you likely would see, the craft chocolate industry is just, blossoming. There are companies coming up everywhere. It happened in the US first, now it's happening in Europe. I think it's really good for chocolate. It creates a lot of noise. A lot of the brands make really good products. Some of the products are, being improved along the way, but there are a lot of products in the market. So I'd say now to launch as a chocolate confectionery is just a noisy field. So I think it takes a little more time to rise above. Our first company, craft was new in the US. There were only about 5 brands, and it was really pretty easy comparatively. But I think the brands with the story that sticks and has an actual real meaning and not just kind of grabbing at the air for things to speak of, has a true higher purpose, those will, in the long term, rise above, because that's what I think speaks to consumers, without getting into the quality and the price and all that. Those matter too.
Sure. But in terms of the location itself, Madagascar, from the stories that we've been writing about your business, seems to be offering up some very strong quality in terms of the cacao there. Can you talk to us a bit about the situation there?
Yeah, it's a little bit of luck that it's an island. So when the cocoa spread around the world from Central South America, after kind of this, well, let's say discovery during the travel from Europe. So it was already there, but our discovery for our own purpose, I guess. And then it traveled around in Madagascar. What lasted on is kind of the more of the Criollo and the Trinitario, which are the finer flavor cocoa species.
Sure.
And then in mainland Africa, a lot of it died off. And also with the Forastero giving more production, that's generally the replant in large production areas. So Madagascar doesn't produce a lot, about 6,000 tons a year, maybe 0.5% of global production, but it's really good flavor, and it represents about 10% of the fine flavor cocoa according to the International Cocoa Organization. So it's in a really nice spot to offer up a unique cocoa and then also make a unique chocolate.
In relation to your principles of ethical trading and sustainability, can you sum up, how significant that is to you as a company?
Yeah, that's at our core, really, because I would say we have a dual brand promise. And we say amazing flavors that do good. So the amazing flavor comes from the ingredients, but also the craftsmanship and finding really good partners in Africa to make really good products. Then the doing good is kind of twofold. One is the supply chain. And that, first, it means we make it in Africa. Secondly, with as many local ingredients. And thirdly, in an ethical way. If we can't hit those three, then we're just not doing it. And we work with Proudly Made in Africa in Ireland that actually works on this. It's an NGO, and they work on this very concept. So they work with us. They audit the supply chain with third parties, and they measure the value we're adding in Africa. And actually being able to tell a consumer, look, by buying this, it's supporting the country at origin as much as if you bought 5 times that in cocoa or in other chocolates that only buy the cocoa. So we're able to say with the sugar we buy there, with the materials we produce, with the cocoa we buy, and the value added in labor, we're able to multiply your impact and really create what we feel is like the next version of fair trade, building upon the idea of fair trade and ingredients and going to a product.
Yeah, that seems to be the critical part in actually having the production there out in Madagascar in this instance, because I think that's not always been possible in other key producing countries like Ghana and Ivory Coast, where it's been the case that the manufacturers would be largely just exporting the beans and then producing in Europe. Yeah. So how much of a difference do you think it's making to the local economy there in having the production there?
Well, I mean, we can see on let's say on a per ton basis. So I was looking, for example, at, a brand that does a lot in cocoa in Tony's, and they're talking about in confectionery, they had a little article, and they're adding in cocoa about $1,600 per ton through farm gate value and premiums, Tony's premiums as well as fair trade. And then when we look at what we can do by the made in Africa, it's about 5.5 times that. Obviously, we're buying a more premium cocoa, so it's a much higher farm gate price, but also that added value. So that's really important, and that's what drives us and makes it an exciting proposition and business model.
This year, of course, has been a challenging one for everybody with regards to the coronavirus pandemic. How has Made in Africa gone about responding to that and dealing with the situation as it is now?
Yeah, I think everybody has the challenges. So that's a unique situation when you can look around the world and everybody can relate to each other in that way. So in Madagascar, they had some of the similar things with half shifts at certain times, and obviously coronavirus challenges for the population. So we had those delays, but I think a lot of it too for companies that import was suddenly in the spring, you had product arriving and in your warehouse, and then sales just dropped off. Unless you're in these really big grocery stores that were looked to as a staple, a lot of sales dropped off. And so a lot of it is the juggling on this side as well, the stock and things. So basically we look to improve our online presence where we work with partners. That was one way. And then other ways is just diversifying our offer and, looking more at sort of gift or multi-sets that people can buy online, because obviously online shipping is a big factor for one chocolate bar. But if you put 3 in, then it's more appealing. And so just really trying to be creative. And definitely I think online already is gaining force in the way people shop, but coronavirus has probably put it ahead 5 years in terms of people's habits. And I think a lot won't change. Obviously people love to go to stores as well, but I think a lot of this will stay after we have a vaccine.
That's interesting. And related to that, in terms of wider market trends, what have you been observing out there in terms of products that you've seen and are indeed developing yourself?
Yeah, well, I think it's a trend that's been around for a while, but vegan is definitely one that you look at and you see the power of the vegan voice far outweighs the number of vegans around at time. And that tells me it's a strong trend. And I think one of the reasons it's so strong is it doesn't just sit within somebody's diet, but it goes to speaking about how we produce our food, how it pollutes the planet. And it's got nodes that come in, it's connected to our world in more than just one way. And especially, of course, in meat substitutes, but even within chocolate, I think you see a huge increase in vegan products. And we're naturally vegan, so we did get accredited for that with the UK Vegetarian Society. But I think that's a big one that we look at, that fits naturally within our brand. And there are other trends, but that would be beyond what we're doing and looking at. But for us, that's the main one in our field of vision.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you for that. And as I was saying, it's obviously a challenging year for many of us, but I think from what I'm seeing out there, people are still doing a lot of product development. And is that the case with yourselves? Are you still beavering away making new lines despite conditions out there at the moment?
Yeah, we just kind of retweaked the timing of the development, because we realized that during this crisis, at least we feel through the end of this year, buyers are just dealing with reality and they don't really want to look at new products. But coming out of it, it's really important to keep people engaged and to build on where you see the brand niche. So for us, we created a dark chocolate called Cashew Ginger Spice. And it'll basically give the consumer a really soft melt in a dark chocolate, because cashew brings that to it, ground into the chocolate, and the ginger and the spice bringing in some winter spices like vanilla, cardamom, and nutmeg. And so that's the bar we'll launch next year. So we're in the process of that.